What's up guys, this is Bryce Van Hoosen from Silver Talon, and today I want to talk to you about the coolest and most useful piece of gear that I have acquired within the past year. This, the WAZA tube amp expander from Boss. So the weird and kind of unfortunate thing about marketing in the social media age, especially for guitar companies, guitar effect companies, whatever, is it seems like whenever a new product drops, right, the usual suspects in the YouTube gear review space all drop a video on the same day, sort of announcing that the product's out. They do a demo, really having not spent very much time with the actual thing that they're reviewing or showing or whatever. And the product's out, and then it sort of just goes away. There's not really any buzz or anything like that afterward. So you get sort of like one day where something's kind of hot and then on to the next thing, right? And that is kind of how the tube amp expander entered into the world. In my opinion, it wasn't really shown off in the best way from folks that were asked to review it and sort of give their thoughts. A lot of people, I feel like, kind of just sort of misrepresented what it was. And this thing is by far the coolest thing that I've acquired within the last year, and it really has made me fall in love with tube amps and want to use tube amps live again versus, say, using my Kemper like I have been doing. So what is the tube amp expander? What does it do? What role is it trying to fill in the marketplace, or what problem is it sort of trying to solve? A lot of people compared it to the Universal Audio aux box when it came out, which I don't feel like is really a fair comparison. Yes, it is an attenuator like the aux box. And full disclosure, I've never used the aux box. I've never really needed to. I always had a Reactive load, which is kind of the same thing, I feel like, as the aux box, without the attenuation. The Sur doesn't have the attenuation. So this basically does that. It's one thing that it does. It has attenuation. It's a load box, right? So you can plug your amp into it and not have to use a cabinet. So you plug your amp into it, this thing takes the load so you're not blowing up your transformer in your amp, and then you can go direct to your computer or your DAW or whatever. And that is really where the similarities between these two things end. The other cool features that it has, and why I think it's such an awesome tool, is, to me, it is sort of like what the Kemper does, and I'm assuming maybe like the Axe FX or the Quad Cortex or something like that. Although I'm only familiar with the Kemper, I've never used those ones. But to me, it sort of does what the Kemper does from the amp onward, right? So from the amp, the effects there, the IR loading, you know, your cabinet, attenuation, your power section, whatever, and then integrating with your computer, with your DAW, whatever. This is basically like all of that stuff from beyond the actual amplifier in the Kemper and onward. It does all of that. What does that mean? That means that basically you get an IR loader, which we already talked about. You get the power section integrated with the cabinet, so you got this attenuator, as well as specific line outs to go to, say, front of house, or you can do a stereo out. You also have the ability to basically recall different rigs. So along with that, you basically have additional effects. So you have in this, there is a studio compressor, EQ, delay, reverb, and all of that kind of stuff. And you can sort of separate some of those out. The EQ, you can separate out between whether you want to EQ your speaker out, so the cabinet, or if you want to EQ the IR, so the direct out, which is nice, and it's the same thing that you can do on the Kemper. You also have a built-in effects loop, so if those effects are not everything that you want, you can use this with a pedal board like I have to basically throw in pedals, and it acts like an effects loop for, say, like an amp that doesn't have an effects loop, like this 1978 Marshall JMP. So you can do that, and it basically allows you to throw whatever you want in between the amplifier and the speaker, and kind of let you do it that way. So like for instance, I have a noise gate in there, and I have a Boss PS6 Harmonist pedal in the effects loop as well. I can use this Boss Metal Zone in the effects loop, and it reacts 100% the same way. There's not really a big difference there. So it's really cool, and you're really able to add a lot of different functionality and just overall kind of like modern bells and whistles and sort of things that we kind of take for granted in the modern world. The other cool thing that this has that is really unique and something that you don't see on other load boxes is you have this reactive load section where you can actually change the resonance and the presence on the reactive load. So there are a couple different options on the top for sort of like what they're telling you is kind of the best settings for all of these, depending on what you want to do. So if you wanted to do something like a high gain, which I assume would be like a Mesa 412 or something with like a vintage 30, right? You go to the low mid resonance and the high mid presence. The setting that I just had it on was like a British 412, so like a Marshall cabinet. I'm doing high and high for both the resonance and the presence. Now this is cool because a lot of load boxes actually are just based off of sort of like one cabinet, one speaker kind of load. It doesn't have that sort of variable feel. But with this, you get choices, so that is always nice. And these are all very usable and very cool, and definitely sort of affect the way that the presence and the bass and that sort of thing kind of cuts through and comes through the speaker. So a really nice touch there. So with that said, there's not a lot of options on the front panel. You can kind of just turn things off in sort of like a preset way. But there is a nifty desktop software that you can use that really lets you get in and sort of add different reverb types or delay types and adjust all the fine-tuning sounds that those have, as well as the compression, EQs, et cetera, et cetera. So let's go through some of the patches that I have set up, or some of the rigs I have set up. Everything's going through my JMP 2203 from 1978. All right, so here I am. I got my Jackson Juggernaut Pro guitar. I am plugged into my pedal board, which is then going into my 1978 Marshall JMP 2203. And then from there into the Boss WAZA tube amp expander, and then into my cabinet. I'm recording everything direct into Reaper using the front of house mono out on this thing here. So here's basically kind of like my my rhythm tone that I have. So here we got the effects loop is on, effects are off. I got a little bit of reverb going just to give it a little bit of some of that IR, some space to the IR so it doesn't sound so close mic'd. I got EQ going as well, which is EQing both the speaker out as well as the IR itself. And this amp control, this is doing nothing right now, but this is basically set as sort of a switch. So if you have kind of like a single mono jack that you can use to switch channels with, you can basically do that and it'll switch your channels for you, which is really nice. So, and then right now I'm going through my Boss Super Overdrive, the SD1, or sorry, I'm going into the Fortin Hex Drive into the Boss Super Overdrive SD1 because I like to stack those, it sounds nice. And then into the Boss Chorus Ensemble, the CE5, and then I have the Zool noise gate going in the effects loop. If I turn that off, here's what it sounds like. Yeah, so that's working really well. And if we want to change the way that the reactive load reacts, let me change it to the high gain setting. So very subtle difference, but you can definitely hear it in kind of the high notes as well as sort of the low, those palm mutes. They react a little bit different on the high gain setting by messing with this low mid and high mid resonant control. All right, so going over to, this is my clean tones using the Electro Harmonics signal pad. that I just did a video on. As well as the effects loop is on. Effects, I got delay and reverb, as you can hear. That's all coming from the tube amp expander. EQ, just to sweeten up those clean tones a little bit. And then, yeah, like I said, the samp control we're not using. Moving on to a rhythm tone that has a little bit of reverb and delay coming from the tube amp expander itself. I am switching between different IRs as well in this, because you can assign a different IR for each rig. So I'm using some IRs that are from the 2 Madsen pack from Bogren Digital, which is a great pack. You should check that out. So that's a rhythm tone with effects just coming straight from the tube amp expander. All right, getting into the lead stuff. Of course, I have more effects coming from here, as well as a nice little volume boost coming from the tube amp expander itself. And then the last one I have here, this has the Boss Harmonist going into the effects loop of this as well. Alright, so that is some additional features that you pretty much would not at all have with an old school one-channel Marshall like this. No effects loop, no channel switching, nothing. But you can have a bunch of different sounds just by using this and a few pedals, and really you kind of have, you've expanded your amp into sort of a multi-channel, versatile amp machine at this point. So, alright, thanks for watching. I am Bryce Van Hoosen, and I will see you next time.